Greetings from our channel again. One of the most recognizable TV hosts, Johnny Carson, gets along with nearly everyone. There have been occasions when his guests have annoyed him, despite his accommodating nature and willingness to be honest with people. Bob Hope is one of the most well-known guests who Johnny Carson detested having on his show. Even though they were two of the most well-known comedians, Johnny Carson and Bob Hope did not have a cordial working relationship. According to reports, Carson, who is renowned for his fluid interviewing techniques and capacity to spark interesting, impromptu discussions, didn't enjoy having Bob Hope on The Tonight Show. Why? Some of the most forced interviews in Tonight Show history resulted from the conflict between Carson's inclination for natural, free-flowing conversations and Hope's strict, pre-scripted style. The renowned comic Bob Hope was an elderly performer who mainly relied on prepared jokes and cue cards by the time he was a regular guest on The Tonight Show. Hope loved to provide prepared one-liners, frequently anticipating that Carson would set him up for a punchline, in contrast to the majority of guests who interacted with Carson in a natural way. According to Carson, this resulted in interviews that felt less like dialogue and more like a pre-arranged comedy routine, which he considered boring and uninspired. Hope's lack of verbal skills was another important contributing element. While Hope's interviews were routine and predictable, Carson thrived on unpredictability. In essence, Hope's team turned Carson into a prop rather than an interviewer by sending the producers of Tonight's Show a list of themes and pre-written jokes beforehand. Carson, who once compared interviewing Hope to talking to Hollywood royalty, was irritated by this lack of true engagement and thought that The Tonight Show frequently felt compelled to book him regardless of whether he had anything novel or intriguing to sell. Hope's visits felt like glorified advertising because they were frequently connected to whatever new program or project he was working on, unlike other guests who came to entertain or share personal experiences. Joan Rivers. The relationship between Johnny Carson and Joan Rivers was complex, ranging from mentorship and friendship to intense animosity. Rivers was one of Carson's favorite Tonight Show guests early in her career. He frequently invited her to appear as a guest presenter on the show because he appreciated her cutting banter, daring humor, and quick wit. But in 1986, their working relationship took a sharp turn, and Carson came to despise Rivers and eventually exclude him from his show completely. 1965 saw the first significant breaks on national television. She soon established herself as a regular, and in the early 1980s, she even frequently appeared as Carson's guest host. Because of this, a lot of people thought she was being prepared to succeed him. Nevertheless, Carson apparently found Rivers challenging to control at times, despite their on-air chemistry. Her fiery humor and bold demeanor were well known, and they occasionally conflicted with Carson's more subdued, polished presenting approach. In Carson's opinion, Rivers' humor was not the true reason he disliked having her on his show, rather, it was a profound emotional betrayal. Rivers became the first woman to anchor her own late-night talk show when she accepted an offer to lead Fox's Late Show featuring Joan Rivers in 1986. She did not, however, personally tell Carson prior to the announcement of the transaction. Carson saw her move as an act of betrayal and felt completely betrayed and caught off guard. He refused to answer her calls and never spoke to her again when Rivers tried to call him to give an explanation. Carson's decision to bar Rivers from The Tonight Show after this controversy persisted for almost 30 years. Out of respect for Carson, his replacement, Jay Leno, maintained the prohibition even after Carson's retirement. Jimmy Fallon took over in 2014. Newton, Wayne. One of the most well-known rivalries in the history of late-night television was that between Johnny Carson and Wayne Newton. Despite his reputation for witty repartee and lighthearted digs at famous people, Carson's constant comments about Newton caused significant tension and ultimately resulted in a personal altercation that left Carson feeling quite uneasy. On The Tonight Show, Carson frequently made fun of Newton, focusing on the singer's flamboyant style, extravagant performances, and apparent lack of jokes. He also made subtle references to Newton's high-voiced, polished appearance and Vegas showmanship, suggesting that he wasn't as tough or manly as other entertainers. While many celebrities took Carson's jabs personally, Newton took offense because he was proud of his accomplishments and didn't like being the target of constant mockery. When Newton made the decision to speak with Carson directly, the tension reached a breaking point. In addition to dismissing Carson's remarks, Newton, who was known for having a lot of connections in Las Vegas, reportedly barged into Carson's office and physically threatened him, telling him to stop making jokes. Newton's message was unambiguous, according to some versions. There would be repercussions if the jokes continued. Known for maintaining control over his show and never giving up, Carson was apparently shocked by the incident. He was not the type to get into violent altercations, and Newton's combative style made an impression. Although Carson's jokes about Newton significantly decreased after the incident, the harm to their friendship had already been done. According to reports, Carson did not like having Newton as a guest because of this past. Even while he remained professional while on air, he probably felt uneasy beside Newton because he was aware of their animosity. Newton had taken things personally, which Carson didn't appreciate, in contrast to other visitors who laughed along with Carson. Ultimately, the conflict between Carson and Newton turned out to be one of the rare occasions in which Carson's humor backfired. A fractured relationship that never entirely recovered resulted from Newton's willingness to confront Carson and his refusal to be the target of a joke. Fred Rogers, popularly known as Mr. Rogers, and Johnny Carson were both television titans, but their approaches couldn't have been more dissimilar. Having a good time with guests was fueled by comedy, spontaneity, and animated conversation. In contrast, Fred Rogers was a really excellent buddy, soft-spoken, and genuinely sincere, and stayed away from conflict or jokes that ridiculed others. Rogers' appearances on The Tonight Show were frequently unpleasant due to this sharp contrast, and Carson apparently didn't like having him as a guest. The main reason Carson felt uneasy around Roger was that there wasn't much space for his typical humorous style. Carson could joke, tease, and have lighthearted banter with most guests, but Rogers' serious and composed manner made that hard. Rogers wasn't there to provide conventional entertainment, compassion, empathy, and early education. Millions of people appreciated his earnestness, but it didn't give Carson much chance to inject his trademark comedy, which made the conversations seem slower and less engaging than those with previous guests. Additionally, it was difficult for Carson to treat Rogers like a typical guest because of his status as an almost saintly figure in children's television. Carson didn't want to come out as cruel if he made too many jokes at his expense. However, unlike other prominent personalities, he was unable to fully engage Rogers in lighthearted conversation. Carson found it difficult to maintain the enthusiasm level throughout this conversational dead zone, which resulted in an awkward and stilted interview. Was that a more mature late-night audience was the target audience for The Tonight Show? Rogers was just not the type of guest that suited the tone of the show, with his soft-spoken talks about emotions and early development. Their disparate styles created an awkward dynamic, despite Carson's admiration for Rogers' work. It's possible that Carson found Rogers' appearances difficult because their television personas didn't fit together, rather than because he harbored personal resentment. Heston, Charlton. Johnny Carson was renowned for his ability to put guests at ease by utilizing his sense of humor and wit to spark lively discussions. Charlton Heston was one of the guests he found challenging to interview, though. Carson apparently didn't like having the iconic actor on The Tonight Show for a number of reasons, even if he never openly voiced his distaste for Heston. Heston's somber and rather inflexible manner was one of the primary problems. Heston, who is well known for his parts in epic movies like Ben-Hur and The Ten Commandments, exuded the gravity of a veteran Hollywood star. Heston frequently maintained a serious and severe demeanor, in contrast to many performers who were open to lighthearted banter and jokes. This stiffness probably made it difficult for Carson, who thrived on spontaneity and playfulness, to generate an engaging interview. Furthermore, Heston was known for being rambling and too serious. Instead of having brief, back-and-forth conversations, he preferred to deliver long, self-important responses when talking about his movies, politics, or personal convictions. Heston's somber demeanor didn't fit Carson's favored dynamic of guests who could match his humor and keep the excitement high. Heston's vocal political opinions might have been another cause of friction. Heston was a fervent conservative who later became a well-known gun rights activist as the president of the National Rifle Association. His views occasionally conflicted with the more liberal or centrist political debate, and he was known to make fun of both sides. It's probable that Heston didn't enjoy being the target of jokes. Since their styles didn't mesh well, Carson probably thought Heston was a challenging visitor overall. Heston offered a strong but extremely serious demeanor that didn't fit the late-night entertainment tone of tonight's broadcast, which Carson wanted to be filled with lively, hilarious conversations. According to reports, Carson, who was always professional, considered talks with Heston to be more of a duty than a fun discussion. Harry Belafonte, the king of late-night television, Johnny Carson, was renowned for his relaxed, easygoing interviewing style. Posed difficulties for him. Harry Belafonte, the well-known singer, actor, and civil rights leader, was one such visitor. Carson apparently found Belafonte to be a challenging guest on The Tonight Show due to his somber manner and politically charged conversations, despite his admiration for his skills and contributions to entertainment. Known for his humanitarian efforts in popular songs like Day-O and Banana Boat Song, Belafonte was more than just a performer. He was a fervent campaigner as well. Belafonte frequently guided conversations toward racial injustice, civil rights, and global humanitarian challenges, in contrast to many celebrity visitors who concentrated on promoting their most recent ventures or indulging in amusing banter. Even though they were significant subjects, they weren't always consistent with The Tonight Show's structure. Carson, who favored keeping interviews lighthearted and non-aggressive, frequently found it difficult to handle conversations with Belafonte, despite the fact that the show was intended to be a fun escapist late-night program. It was more difficult for him to bring his trademark comedy to the table when the guests were overly serious or political. Although Carson was adept at managing a diverse array of personalities, he was not renowned for having in-depth political conversations, particularly when it came to delicate subjects like social justice and race. A guest like Belafonte, who was fervently dedicated to activism, occasionally changed the tone in a way that wasn't compatible with Carson's lighthearted style, and the audience tuned in anticipating entertainment and laughs. Carson took pains to strike a balance between fun and serious conversations, and guests who focus too much on weighty subjects may make for an awkward and challenging encounter. Nevertheless, Belafonte was a well-respected personality in the entertainment sector, and Carson always maintained his professionalism. But because of their different styles, Carson's being more of an entertainer and Belafonte more of an activist, they created a dynamic that Carson apparently didn't like as much as he did with other guests who embraced the show's humor. Despite his reputation for charisma and his ability to put almost any guest at ease, Johnny Carson apparently didn't like having some superstars on The Tonight Show. Among them was Chevy Chase, the comedian and former Saturday Night Live star whose visits frequently annoyed Carson. The comedian's reputation for conceit was one of the main reasons Carson didn't appreciate having Chase on the show. As the original Weekend Update anchor on Saturday Night Live, Chase rose to stardom in the mid-1970s and soon gained a reputation for being conceited and egocentric in Hollywood. Chase frequently exuded a sense of superiority that contrasted with Carson's more relaxed yet commanding hosting approach, in contrast to many comedians who arrived on The Tonight Show eager to join in on Carson's banter. Chase's comedy, which frequently relied on sarcasm, deadpan delivery, and occasional mean-spiritedness, was another important contributing factor. Despite his reputation for witty repartee, Carson usually kept his humor charming and friendly. The show's rhythm was occasionally disturbed by Chase's more self-indulgent and cutting style, which made their exchanges uncomfortable instead than amusing. The interview could easily devolve into a heated or awkward discussion if a guest didn't have a fun and easy conversation with Carson. Something that appeared to occur when Chase was seated. Younger comedians who appeared unduly anxious to promote themselves as Carson's successor were also known to make him nervous. As an SNL early breakout star, Chase was said to aspire to become the next late-night television king. Because of this, Carson might have seen him more as a competitor than a friend. Despite being titans of entertainment, Frank Sinatra and Johnny Carson's meetings on The Tonight Show were sometimes tense. Carson apparently didn't love having Sinatra on the show for a number of reasons, despite the fact that he was a renowned guest and that his performances garnered a lot of attention. First of all, Sinatra may be a difficult visitor due to his legendary personality and sporadic haughtiness. He was known to be contemptuous or impolite, particularly when he didn't like the way things were going. Occasionally ran afoul of Carson's more relaxed professional manner. Carson appreciated guests who accepted the structure in his job as host because he valued control over his show. But Sinatra wasn't always abiding by the unwritten norms of late-night television since he was accustomed to being the center of attention. One notorious instance was when Sinatra abruptly entered the stage during Carson's monologue, cutting the host in the middle of a joke. It was an obvious power maneuver by Sinatra, who appeared to enjoy taking center stage, but Carson handled the situation with his usual poise and humor. Such instances probably irritated Carson, who took great satisfaction in keeping his program fluid and well-planned. Behind-the-scenes conflict could be caused by demands and entourage. He frequently brought a sizable entourage of friends and colleagues, which might cause production issues for the performance. It's possible that Carson, who was renowned for his professionalism and need for a controlled setting, found these antics offensive or distracting. Carson acknowledged Sinatra's star power and the contribution he made to the show in spite of these obstacles. Audiences always looked forward to Sinatra's appearances, and Carson recognized the value of having such a legendary show. But there was a noticeable underlying tension between the two men. Carson's expertise as a host is demonstrated by his ability to handle these situations with grace and comedy, but it's obvious that Sinatra wasn't the best guest in Carson's opinion due to his diva-like demeanor and occasional disrespect for the show's rules. Midler, Bet. Some of the most memorable moments in the history of The Tonight Show were shared by Johnny Carson and Bette Midler, including Midler's poignant performance episode in 1992. Nevertheless, there were hints that Carson didn't really appreciate having Midler as a guest, even if they got along well on air and respected each other. Midler's strong, outspoken attitude, off-camera dynamics, and personality differences all contributed to this conflict. Carson was renowned for his ability to keep his show under control and for his cool, collected manner. He favored visitors who respected his position as host and could blend in with the conversational style of the show. Conversely, Midler was a fiery, outrageous performer with a fearless demeanor. Her vivacity and assertiveness occasionally ran counter to Carson's more reserved manner, causing an imbalance that can give the impression that their interactions are not fair. Although this dynamic frequently produced fascinating television, Carson might have felt a little uneasy or overpowered by it. Speaking about her relationship with Carson, Midler has revealed that he was frequently aloof from her off-camera. She surmised that her assertiveness and assurance may have frightened or unnerved Carson. In a time when many men in the entertainment industry were not used to female visitors being so outspoken, Midler was a strong, independent lady who was renowned for his conventional sensibilities, would have found it difficult to relate to her personally, despite his admiration for her skill. Furthermore, Midler frequently gave emotionally intense and show-stopping performances on the show, which may deflect attention from Carson. For instance, one of the most memorable moments in late-night history was her farewell performance in 1992, when she performed a moving mix of songs while perched on Carson's desk, bringing him to tears. Although this was a lovely and moving moment, it also demonstrated how Midler's might take center stage and make Carson feel marginalized. The intensity of Midler's performances and their different personalities may have made her a less comfortable visitor for Carson, even though he appreciated her enormous talent and the entertainment value she added to his show. The complications of two strong personalities negotiating the realm of late-night television were reflected in their relationship, which was a blend of professional adoration and subtle personal conflict. Carlin George participated in interviews throughout time. Early in Carlin's career, he hosted him multiple times. However, it soon became apparent that their sensibilities and styles did not mesh well, and Carson reportedly disliked having Carlin as a guest in the future. The sharp difference between their humorous identities and approaches was one of the causes of the friction. Although Carson was undoubtedly capable of edgy humor, he typically stuck to a mainstream, polished style that was suitable for a wide range of viewers. His programs sought to amuse viewers without offending them, becoming more well-known for his rebellious, countercultural viewpoint, particularly in the 1970s. Carlin's humor started to question the same norms that Carson aimed to uphold on his show as his routines became more controversial, addressing topics like politics, religion, and social hypocrisies. Carson was probably apprehensive to have Carlin return as a regular guest because of this discrepancy. Carson's preference for visitors who followed the show's rules and behaved in a particular way was another consideration. It's possible that Carson's want to have control over the tone of his show conflicted with Carlin's unpredictable personality. Even if a guest was well liked by the crowd, Carson had a reputation for discreetly removing himself from them if he thought they broke the flow or went too far. Carson might have been hesitant to include Carlin because of his increasing notoriety as a countercultural figure. Carson also appreciated professionalism and was a quiet, reserved person. It's possible that Carson did not personally connect with Carlin's unorthodox approach and change in his early career. Even though Carlin was a comic genius, their working relationship cooled because his changing personality and sense of humor just did not fit Carson's vision for The Tonight Show. Winters, Shelley. Winters, Shelley. One of the rare visitors who appeared to try Carson's tolerance and cause him obvious discomfort during her appearances was the Oscar-winning actress. As time went on, it became clear that Carson did not like having Winters on his program, and their relationship was frequently hostile and erratic. The outspoken and erratic nature of Winters was a big factor in Carson's stated distaste. Winters had a reputation for being bold, strong-willed, and not averse to taking over discussions. She frequently questioned Carson's inquiries, cut him off, or changed the subject. This interfered with the show's flow. Dealing with a guest who didn't adhere to the unwritten rules of late-night television decorum must have been frustrating for Carson, who was renowned for his composure and easy handling of interviews. It's possible that her inclination to dominate the conversation ran counter to Carson's methodically planned framework. Additionally, Winters was known for being erratic and combative, which added to the tension surrounding her visits. During one notorious interview, she allegedly took off a shoe and gave it to Carson, which clearly irritated him. While some viewers found the antics amusing, Carson, who valued professionalism and favored guests who complimented his comedy rather than overpowered him, probably didn't enjoy them. Carson might have found it difficult to control Winters' exuberant nature during a live show. Furthermore, Winters' more colorful, outspoken personality did not mesh well with Carson's own, which was a blend of Midwestern reserve and sardonic wit. Carson was able to fight with guests in a lighthearted manner, but Winters' audacity frequently made him uneasy. Carson may have been reluctant to bring her back on a frequent basis because their encounters occasionally felt contentious rather than lighthearted. In the end, Shelley Winter was a difficult guest for Johnny Carson because of her strong personality and erratic conduct, which conflicted with Carson's taste for controlled, fluid conversations. Snyder, Tom. Another well-known figure who Carson reputedly disliked hosting was Tom Snyder, the mysterious and frank host of Tomorrow, the broadcaster's best late-night show. Although both Snyder and Carson were regulars on late-night television, there was tension between them when Snyder debuted on The Tonight Show because of their different personalities and methods of watching television. Snyder's exaggerated demeanor and propensity to control conversations were major causes of conflict. Snyder was a skilled interviewer in his own way, renowned for his forceful, occasionally combative manner. He frequently took over the conversation when he was a guest on Carson's show, talking for a long time and sometimes drowning out Carson. Given his more humorous and relaxed demeanor, Carson probably found it challenging to deal with Snyder's controlling presence. There might have been conflict between the two because Snyder was unable or unwilling to submit to Carson as the host. Furthermore, Carson could not have liked Snyder's tendency to brag and his occasionally arrogant manner. Carson appreciated visitors who laughed with him and let him direct the conversation. A lot about himself or his own program, which would throw off the equilibrium of a normal Carson interview. Carson, who preferred a more conversational and cooperative tone, was probably irritated by this dynamic. Their divergent temperaments might have been another contributing element. While Snyder was known for being fiery and opinionated, Carson was renowned for being quiet off-screen and frequently avoiding personal controversy or disagreement. There might have been a natural mismatch between them because of their different energy and attitudes to late-night television. Additionally, honors Zaza Gabor, who Snyder hosted Tomorrow right after The Tonight Show on NBC for years. Johnny Carson was well known for his ability to interact with a diverse range of guests, including actors, comedians, and cultural figures. Zaza Gabor, however, was one of the visitors that apparently irritated or frustrated him. Carson found it difficult to host the Hungarian-born actress and socialite because of her colorful personality and lavish lifestyle, which frequently clashed with his more subdued and sardonic manner. To control discussions. Gabor was well known for her witty remarks, exaggerated demeanor, and propensity to talk endlessly about her relationships, fortune, and opulent lifestyle. Although some audiences found this amusing, Carson frequently had little opportunity to direct the discussion or add his signature comedy. Carson was irritated by Gabor's self-centered narration, which frequently disrupted the show's flow. He liked guests who could joke around with him and play along with his subtle jokes. Carson was annoyed by Gabor's diva-like and showy demeanor. She frequently capitalized on her image as a glitzy and quirky socialite, which occasionally came across as ostentatious or dishonest. Her antics probably annoyed Carson, who appreciated genuineness and had a keen sense of pretense. Furthermore, because Gabor tried to keep the tone of his interviews light and professional rather than straying into embarrassing area, his tendency to flirt excessively with male hosts, particularly Carson, may have caused him discomfort. There can be another problem with self-awareness. Carson was adept at subtly making fun of his visitors. He frequently used comedy to expose inconsistencies or disarm them. There was a gap between the two, though, since these instances of deft interplay frequently fell flat due to Gabor's incapacity or refusal to laugh at herself. Zaza Gabor was ultimately a difficult guest due to her diva-like conduct, controlling nature, and incapacity to match Carson's sense of humor. They probably tried Carson's tolerance and upset the equilibrium he tried so hard to keep on The Tonight Show. Norman Mailer, known for his divisive views, aggressive manner, and propensity to start arguments, Mailer frequently caused conflict on his visits on Carson's show, which is why Carson apparently didn't like wearing him. The combative and polemical nature of Mailer was one of the main causes of Carson's unease with the author. For pushing the envelope throughout his interviews, frequently confronting his interviewer or guiding the discussion into awkward areas. Mailer's hostile attitude was probably tiring for Carson, whose manner was more conversational and humorous, and it disrupted The Tonight Show's lighter tone. Carson's fondness for light-hearted banter frequently contrasted with Mailer's tendency to turn discussions into arguments. Another point of contention was Mailer's propensity to control discussions, maintaining a harmony between storytelling, humor, and stimulating conversation. But Mailer frequently took center stage, talking for extended periods of time and giving Carson little opportunity to interrupt or direct the conversation. Carson, who appreciated visitors who enabled a cooperative and interesting conversation, would have been irritated by this dynamic. Furthermore, Mailer was already known for his controversial reputation. He is well known for his candid opinions on politics and society, which may cause awkward situations or alienate audiences. Mailer's unpredictable and frequently harsh manner was probably a liability to Carson, who crafted his show to appeal to a wide audience. Lastly, Mailer's ego and intellectual swagger were in stark contrast to Carson's quiet demeanor. In the end, Norman Mailer's aggressive demeanor, commanding presence, and contentious inclinations clashed with Johnny Carson's vision for The Tonight Show, making him one of the host's least favorite guests, Tony Curtis. Carson was able to handle challenging guests with humor, but Mailer's intensity and refusal to fit in with the show's lighter tone. Even while Curtis was unquestionably a well-known celebrity and an intriguing individual, his conduct and demeanor in interviews frequently conflicted with Carson's, which caused friction for the host when he appeared. Conversations were supposedly one of the primary reasons Carson didn't like Tony Curtis on the show. Known for his vivacity and self-assurance, Curtis frequently dominated interviews by rambling on about his personal life, work, or Hollywood anecdotes. Although these tales might be amusing, they usually didn't provide Carson much opportunity to direct the discussion or add his trademark comedy. Curtis's monopoly of the spotlight probably annoyed Carson, who relied on a balanced interaction with his guests. Curtis's excessive personality, funny manner, and penchant for self-promotion. Curtis frequently came across as unduly eager to remind viewers of his fame and achievements, which could have thrown off the show's organic flow. Curtis's exaggerated demeanor would have annoyed Carson, who liked visitors who were self-aware and not afraid to make fun of themselves. The unpredictable nature of Curtis was another aspect. Curtis was well known for his charisma and theatricality, but he sometimes strayed from the subject or tried to outdo Carson with his antics or humor. Curtis's propensity to attract attention to himself might disrupt the show's rhythm and produce moments that felt chaotic rather than enjoyable, even if Carson was adept at managing challenging guests. Finally, Curtis's behavior might have just annoyed Carson. Curtis's bravado and over-the-top manner probably didn't fit Carson's tone, which he tried to establish on The Tonight Show. Carson prized professionalism and nuance. Don Rickles. Carson found a lot of humor and sometimes annoyance in the legendary insult comedian and regular guest on the show, Don Rickles. Despite being a comic classic and a fan favorite, Rickles occasionally caused Carson trouble during his performances because of his erratic and uncontrolled energy. Rickles' propensity to dominate the conversation was one of the main reasons he might be a difficult guest for Carson. Rickles' comedy was fast-paced, unrelenting, and focused on making fun of everyone in the room, including Carson. Rickles' antics broke the flow of the show, even though Carson frequently cooperated and even relished being the target of his gags. In his interviews, Carson emphasized control and balance, thus his unpredictability was probably both a boon and a bane. Carson's patience was also put to the strain by Rickles' lack of boundaries. Rickles was well known for breaking the fourth wall and disregarding the customary protocol of talk show appearances. He would frequently stand up from his chair, engage with the audience, or make fun of the production team. Audiences loved these chaotic interactions, preferring structured comedy to complete mayhem. On one famous occasion, Rickles even broke Carson's cigarette box on his desk while he was a guest, which caused Carson to storm onto the set of Rickles' sitcom, CPO Sharky, and confront him in a hilarious but obviously irritated moment. Rickles' constant taunting of Carson was another cause of friction. Rickles' comedy frequently went farther than most, even though Carson was renowned for his keen wit and willingness to spar with guests. He would make fun of Carson in ways that sometimes seemed to go beyond lighthearted banter, making it difficult for Carson to remain composed while entertaining the crowd. Even though Carson was a good sport, Rickles' jokes might have occasionally offended him, especially if they alluded to his private life or fears. Carson and Rickles shared a special humorous chemistry and a mutual respect, notwithstanding their occasional conflicts. Some of The Tonight Show's funniest and most memorable moments. But it's obvious that Rickles was a guest who could both please and annoy the renowned host due to his unpredictable nature, boundary-pushing comedy, and propensity to overshadow Carson.